growing fast that Robert Downey Jr. is having trouble on the set of his new Avengers film with Ryan Reynolds.
Please tell me Mr. Ramos is not replacing me as Dr. Doom via Parker Robbins. Is there something you're not telling me? Anyway, I don't want to step on your interview.
Bob Iger makes 400 times what his lowest worker is. And I think that's a shame, Bob.
Spider-Man After Spider-Man Brand New Day will not be in the Avengers film at all. They will not mention him, he's not going to show up, and Tom Holland will not be in the film at all. Details on the clash that happened between two actors on the set of Avengers Doomsday have hit the net, and people believe that they figured out who one or two of these actors might be. One seems to 100% be Robert Downey Jr., but who's the other one? Well, we might know. They're speculating.
Or keep sinking like a stone at the box office. But the real problem for Disney is that their next big bet, Avengers Doomsday, is mired in production trouble behind the scenes, of the kind that is giving Fantastic a run for its money. Kevin Feige is, in other words, up a creek without a paddle.
Marvel didn't just light a fuse, someone hurled the whole stick of dynamite into the room. Reports say Robert Downey Jr. looked Ryan Reynolds in the eye, dropped a line so brutal it scorched the floor, then refused to walk it back. No PR gloss, no my bad, just a cold stop and an even colder stare. On a film meant to save the MCU, the real story isn't the villain on screen, it's the clash of egos behind it. Pinewood Studios, August 2025, cameras rolling, budgets soaring, RDJ back in armor, this time as Doom, not Stark. Reynolds circling with a Deadpool cameo that could stitch him into the Avengers timeline. Then a joke cuts too deep. The room ices over. Crew freezes. Suddenly, the most expensive schedule in Hollywood bends around two men who won't share air, let alone a scene. This isn't gossip. It's a pattern. RDJ moves like a king who built the castle. Reynolds, the jester who knows its weak spots. One controls with gravity. The other tests every line with a grin that cuts. Put them together, and something has to give. Money, time, maybe the entire Phase 6 map. And if the rumors are even half true, this wasn't just a bad day at work, it was a fracture big enough to split the franchise that defined a decade.
Now here's what he actually said on his podcast. I've heard that they paid Robert Downey Jr. 50 to 60 million. Disney had to reshoot for 3 weeks. They reshot 3 weeks worth of material because apparently, and this is what he heard, they had an actor standing in for Downey Jr. in the Dr. Doom suit, basically wearing the mask and the suit. They had a body double and a face double, and Downey stood off camera reading the lines. Apparently, after 2 or 3 weeks, he was like, this isn't working. I want to reshoot everything with me in the suit. Now, I can't confirm this.
But that wasn't the whole story. What should have been routine turned into chaos. Sources say it began with a joke, something harmless in tone but sharp enough to hit the wrong nerve. Ryan Reynolds, known for slipping sarcasm into every room, aimed his humor at the wrong target. Robert Downey Jr., under Doom's mask, didn't laugh. Witnesses describe a heated confrontation that froze the cameras. The mood flipped instantly. Lights felt hotter. Chatter died out.
That he's going to be in Avengers. And he dropped this logo on his Instagram literally the night that Taylor Swift was doing a countdown for her new album. It was very weird. It was in the middle of the night, same time. It really did look like he was trying to beat the algorithm and get his name out there with Avengers stories, which he did. And so this rumor started running rampant.
All eyes locked on the two stars as the tension boiled. RDJ's voice was icy. Reynolds tried to deflect with humor, but it only escalated. Production called an unscheduled break, one that dragged on for hours. Insiders insist this wasn't about script notes or lighting cues. It was personal. One felt mocked, the other disrespected. And in that moment, the billion-dollar weight of Avengers. Doomsday buckled under two egos clashing. By the time the dust settled, Marvel executives were already being briefed. But the studio wasn't about to let the story end there. They went into emergency mode, throwing money at the problem. And that's where Section 2 begins.
Is where Downey Jr. pointed out to both Marvel and Disney that this could not only ruin his reputation, but also caused him fans, and he's against making those statements. However, both Bob and Kevin informed him that taking part in these types of statements and the press tour for Ironheart is built into his very expensive contract for the future of the MCU, mostly related to the return in Avengers Doomsday. RDJ is already challenging both Bob Iger and Kevin Feige that he will only make statements defending Ironheart and Riri Williams if it avoids arguments about DEI.
The moment word reached Disney, alarms went off in Burbank. This wasn't some indie flick where two actors could be quietly shuffled off set. This was the crown jewel, the project meant to rescue Phase 6. Within hours, Marvel executives rolled out contingency plans that sounded like something out of a war room. Separate call sheets, different shooting times, scenes restructured to keep RDJ and Reynolds apart, even if it meant rewriting sequences fans had been waiting years to see. And it wasn't cheap. Leaks suggest the adjustments cost millions. Private trailers parked at opposite ends of the lot. Body doubles rehearsing entire sequences before either actor stepped on set. Rumors even say Marvel was willing to split filming locations just to keep the peace. Imagine it. Disney, the studio famous for control and precision, suddenly bending over backward to babysit its two biggest stars. What shocked insiders most wasn't the fight itself. It was Disney's reaction. They didn't discipline. They didn't demand apologies. They surrendered, because in their eyes, losing either actor was worse than burning money. If that meant reshooting weeks of footage, fine. If that meant rearranging release schedules, fine. Anything to stop Avengers Doomsday from collapsing before the first trailer even dropped. But giving in to egos always has consequences. And with RDJ, history shows exactly what happens when he gets the upper hand. Robert Downey Jr. isn't new to conflict. His story is Hollywood legend. The fall from grace, the comeback, the empire. But with that rise came leverage, and with leverage came demands. On Iron Man, he was the risk. By Endgame, he was the king. And kings rarely compromise. Remember Terrence Howard? Cast as Rhodey in 2008, he earned more than RDJ for the first Iron Man. By the sequel, Howard was gone, his salary cut, his role recast, his future with Marvel erased. Howard would later blame Downey directly, claiming the studio shifted his pay to fund RDJ's raise. Downey brushed it off with a business-like shrug, but the message was clear. When money and power collide, he comes out on top. Then there's the infamous urine jar protest on Zodiac. Fed up with David Fincher's obsessive demand for 90 takes per scene, RDJ reportedly left jars around set to mock the lack of bathroom breaks. It was petty, it was passive-aggressive, but it was effective. Fincher adjusted, and RDJ kept filming on his terms. That's the playbook. Pressure, protest, and control until the situation bends in his direction. Now fast forward to Avengers Doomsday. Reports say RDJ demanded reshoots of weeks' worth of footage shot with stand-ins wearing Doom's armor. He didn't just want to dub lines, he wanted to physically be in the suit. Disney caved. Millions evaporated into the budget. The narrative shifted. This wasn't Marvel's movie anymore. It was RDJ's. But while Downey exerts quiet control, Ryan Reynolds plays a very different game, one that thrives on chaos. If Downey is a chess player, Reynolds is a firecracker. He thrives on pushing buttons, often to the breaking point, and Hollywood has receipts. Back in 2004, Blade Trinity turned into a nightmare. Wesley Snipes reportedly refused to acknowledge Reynolds by name, calling him that cracker. The two clashed so badly that production limped along with stunt doubles and improvised insults. Years later, Reynolds would joke about it, but insiders say the hostility was real. Then came Red Notice. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson allegedly kept Reynolds waiting for 5 hours on set. When Johnson finally arrived, Reynolds snapped. Words flew, tempers flared, and for years afterward, the two stars didn't speak. Johnson called it a tiff. Others called it a full-on feud. Either way, Reynolds didn't back down. And perhaps most telling, the TJ Miller incident during Deadpool 2. In character as Deadpool, Reynolds reportedly fired off cruel, cutting lines aimed directly at Miller, not just his role. The set froze. Crew members whispered, "Why is he doing this?" Miller later admitted he thought Reynolds was insecure, using humor to mask deeper tension. The pattern is clear. Reynolds brings energy, wit, and unpredictability. But sometimes it turns toxic. His Deadpool persona doesn't turn off when cameras stop rolling. That unpredictability, mixed with Downey's need for control, was a recipe for disaster. And when you add Scarlett Johansson to the equation, the tension only gets worse. If the feud on Avengers Doomsday felt explosive, that's because it wasn't just born on set. It was years in the making. Hidden history, failed friendships, and bruised egos were already woven into the story long before cameras rolled. Start with Scarlett Johansson. She and Ryan Reynolds were once married, briefly, from 2008 to 2011. The split was messy, described by Johansson herself as difficult and unhealthy. Years later, Robert Downey Jr. became one of Scarlett's closest allies through their Marvel years, a bond forged over a decade of films. Whispers in Hollywood suggest Johansson didn't hold back when talking about her ex-husband, and Downey listened. So when RDJ walked onto the Doomsday set, he may have already been primed to see Reynolds as trouble. But that wasn't the only baggage. Just a year earlier, Reynolds had personally invited Downey to cameo in Deadpool and Wolverine. The pitch was bold. Tony Stark cracking jokes with Deadpool in a fourth-wall shattering sequence. Every other veteran actor Reynolds approached signed on. RDJ? He flat out refused. Polite, but firm. To Reynolds, who poured himself into that project, it felt like a rejection not of the script, but of him. Then the film went on to gross over $1 billion, cementing Reynolds as Marvel's golden boy. Fans cheered, Disney celebrated, but under the surface, that snub lingered. When Reynolds and Downey finally shared a set again, old wounds resurfaced. To RDJ, Reynolds was the chaotic outsider Scarlett had warned him about. To Reynolds, Downey was the Hollywood king who dismissed him before, and who now seemed determined to remind him who really ran the MCU. So when the joke gone too far exploded on set in August 2025, it wasn't just comedy that missed the mark. It was a decade of personal history, silent grudges, and professional rivalry boiling over in front of the cameras. By the time Avengers Doomsday entered production, Marvel was limping. Phase 4 and Phase 5 had left scars. Lukewarm reviews, box office flops, and fans groaning that the magic was gone. The promise of RDJ's return and Reynolds' crossover cameo was Disney's Hail Mary. Doomsday wasn't just another film, it was supposed to reset the board, reignite the fire, and prove Marvel still ruled cinema. Instead, reports of chaos bled out before a single teaser dropped. Anonymous crew leaks described endless rewrites, half-finished VFX, and actors filming in isolated green screen bubbles like strangers. Scheduling delays pushed release from May 2025 into late 2026. Budgets ballooned beyond control. Every sign screamed, "This ship is sinking." Fans who once cheered Marvel's polished machine now saw something darker, a studio staggering under the weight of its own empire. The feud between Downey and Reynolds wasn't just gossip. It symbolized the unraveling of Disney's greatest franchise. If their biggest stars couldn't keep it together, how could the studio promise a cinematic universe that spanned decades? And when the story leaked online, the fandom split wide open. The internet ignited like dry brush. On one side, hashtag Team RDJ. Loyalists who remembered Iron Man's first flight, who credited Downey with building the MCU from nothing. To them, RDJ was Marvel's heart, the man who carried it through Endgame, the legend who earned the right to call the shots. Any conflict? Clearly Reynolds' fault. On the other side, hashtag Team Reynolds, a younger, sharper faction energized by Deadpool and Wolverine's billion-dollar run. They saw Reynolds as the future, the rebel who dared to poke fun at Marvel's formula while reviving fan excitement. To them, Downey was yesterday's king, clinging to power he should have left behind. The debates got vicious. Reddit threads dissected podcast quotes like they were court transcripts, X, formerly Twitter, filled with memes of doom-choking Deadpool. Fan edits pitted their box office numbers against each other. Even mainstream outlets leaned into the spectacle, running headlines like, "The MCU Civil War Nobody Expected." But beneath the jokes, the division was real. Fans weren't just arguing about two actors. They were debating Marvel's soul, tradition versus disruption, loyalty versus reinvention. And Disney, stuck in the middle, faced the nightmare of losing both. Because Hollywood knows all too well what happens when power struggles go unchecked. Insiders didn't hesitate to draw parallels. The feud echoed the infamous clash between Vin Diesel and The Rock on Fast and Furious. That battle of egos nearly split the franchise in half, forcing Universal to redesign entire films around keeping them apart. Billions were still made, but the scars lingered. Now Disney faced the same monster. Downey, the veteran who had resurrected his career through Iron Man, wasn't about to play second fiddle. Reynolds, the sharp-tongued outsider, wasn't about to muzzle his personality. Each man represented a different kind of power, and neither was backing down. Industry analysts warned that this wasn't an isolated storm, it was a trend. Stars had become bigger than the franchises they anchored. Dwayne Johnson, Tom Cruise, even Johnny Depp had proven that studios now bowed to egos rather than risking collapse. The question wasn't if Disney could finish Avengers Doomsday. The question was whether they could control it once it hit theaters. And hovering over it all was Disney's broader spiral, a company battered by controversies far beyond Marvel. In the end, the fight between Robert Downey Jr. and Ryan Reynolds isn't just about two men. It's about the fate of a universe. Disney can't afford to lose either. Fans won't accept silence forever, and every delay, every rumor, every leak pulls the curtain back on an empire struggling to hold itself together. Will Disney side with the king who built the MCU, or the rebel who revived it? Will Avengers Doomsday be the comeback Marvel promised, or the implosion that proves even billion-dollar franchises can crumble? What's certain is this: the cameras will roll, the film will release, and fans will show up. But they won't just be watching Doctor Doom battle Deadpool, watching Robert Downey Jr. versus Ryan Reynolds. And maybe, just maybe, we'll be watching the moment Marvel finally lost control of its crown jewel. Because this wasn't just a feud, it was the warning shot. The MCU's future is no longer guaranteed, and what happens next will either save the franchise or bury it forever.